Okay, good evening and welcome back once again to the We Are Marshall podcast. My name is Stephen Marshall and this is my co-host Bill McIntyre. We are just two guys discussing the issues of the day, laying out the facts of those issues, and giving you our opinion and view on those issues. We would also love it here at the We Are Marshall podcast if you would like and share all of our episodes around your social media. We can be found on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Locals, X, Truth Social, and Rumble. Rumble is where we populate our full channel with season 1 and 2 of all of our episodes. Download the free app Rumble and search the We Are Marshall podcast. Then subscribe and follow to get notification of new episodes and other endeavors by Bill and I. Check out our episodes on all these social media sites and share them to help us grow. We would also love it if you would check out our website at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com. You can see a number of things Bill and I are working on the website. If you go to Bill's bio, you can click on a link to all his blog posts and check out Vella on Amazon, where Bill also writes episodic short stories for your viewing. Check out my 2 books currently for sale on Amazon, The Unforeseen Enemy and The Perception Therapist. Both are available now. Also, check out our sponsors, Local Prints New Hampshire. You can go to our website again at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com and click on the link to Local Prints New Hampshire on the top left. They're a full-scale screen printing company in Hampstead, New Hampshire, and they are available for domestic and international printing. Go support them as they support us. Also, check out our large sponsor, MateConnector.com, a large dating website, just like all the other big dating websites out there, with all the features that the big players have in the dating sphere. But Mate Connector is much more inexpensive than any of the other players in the dating market. We would also like it if you would support our newest sponsor, Army Ranger Painting and Contracting. You can contact and look into them at www.armyrangerpainting.com. They're a full-service contracting company supporting Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Check them out and schedule a free estimate of any project you have. If you have any questions or issues, you can reach us both at the following emails. Bill can be reached at bill@wearemarshallpodcast.com, and I can be reached at steve@wearemarshallpodcast.com. We have a lot to cover today, so let us jump right into the issues of the day. Today, we will be talking about the Israel hostage rescue, and of course, the response to the rescue by Western politicians and media. We will also be discussing how the left media is turning on Joe Biden by presenting a few stories they are writing now, and end the podcast with a climate feel-good story this episode. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into topic 1, and there's a lot of information here that we're going to find out. And this first story is from a left-leaning site called Politico. Now, they publish only stuff for the Democrats, okay? So I'm going to their source.
Don't even turn right.
Yep, I'm going to their sources to get the receipts from them themselves rather than us to grab right side leaning stuff to give you that would be, again, bias against Biden as it is. But Biden insists he's not involved in his family business dealings, but his aides are a different story. The overlapping roles are under scrutiny as the president distanced himself from his family's dealings. For years, Joe Biden shared a bookkeeper with his son Hunter. He also shared a personal lawyer with his brother Jim. And when Jim Biden wanted to know more about one of Hunter Biden's associates, he hired the former head of Joe Biden's Secret Service detail to investigate. Since 2019, Joe Biden has repeatedly distanced himself from his family's business dealings, saying that he has never so much as discussed them with his relatives or with anyone else. But House impeachment inquiry interviews, public records, and emails reviewed by Politico show that members of his inner circle were regularly enmeshed in those dealings. Many of the president's closest staffers and advisors have doubled as his relatives' business associates, both during and after their stints working for the man at the center of the Biden family orbit. These overlaps reflect an all-in-the-family approach to business and politicking that dates back a half-century to the president's first Senate bid, run primarily by his parents and siblings. Since then, his political patrons have at times forged business ties with his relatives who in turn have converted some of the business partners into campaign supporters, and over a lifetime in public life, some of the president's aides have taken on roles as surrogate members of the tight-knit Biden clan. The Bidens' approach complicates their efforts to distance the president from his family's ventures. As Jim and Hunter Biden's foreign dealings have caused controversy, and several of their business partners have been convicted of federal fraud and corruption crimes in recent years, any potential links between their business dealings and the president have come in for renewed scrutiny. To allay concerns about any intermingling of their affairs, the Bidens have said that they observe strict interpersonal firewalls to avoid discussing business among themselves. But with so many former and current aides in the mix, and with the surfacing of private communications in which Jim and Hunter Biden suggest they represent their powerful relative in business matters, onlookers are forced to take family members at their word that those firewalls always held. Bullshit. In one instance, Jim Biden testified that he hired the former head of his brother's Secret Service detail, Dale Pupillo, to investigate a Chinese executive that Hunter Biden was doing business with in 2017. Jim Biden said during this February impeachment inquiry interview that he commissioned Pupillo in advance of accompanying Hunter Biden to Hong Kong so that his nephew could meet with the executive, Patrick Ho. Despite hiring a private investigator and traveling halfway around the world for the meeting, Jim Biden said he never asked Hunter Biden what Ho, then on the cusp of being arrested and later convicted on federal corruption charges, and his nephew were meeting about. You're going to tell me Jim Biden never asked Hunter, whom he hired a private investigator to look into Ho, about what they met about? Why would he hire a private investigator at all if he wasn't going to discuss what Hunter and Ho discussed? It's ridiculous. He said the decision not to inquire about the meeting came down to a desire to quarantine his affairs from those of his nephews. That may be hard for you to believe, he told an incredulous Republican staffer, but that's the way we operate in my family. It is unclear whether the president's current or former staffers are presently involved in his relatives' business affairs.
Well, if you have firewalls, what's the point of even saying that in the first place if you're supposedly so insulated from each other with your own?
Well, because they want to try to make it look like they got something set up. You know, it's a preemptive show of saying, oh, we don't talk about anything. It's ridiculous. It's like, Bill, you and I talk about so much stuff, be like us saying we didn't talk about that. Come on. Neither the White House representatives for Jim and Hunter Biden nor the president's current or former aides responded to requests for comment. In a 3-decade career in the Secret Service, Pupillo climbed the ranks and eventually oversaw vice presidential protection for both Dick Cheney and Joe Biden. A series of scandals at the agency led to a high-profile shakeup that saw Pupillo, by then Assistant Director for Protective Operations, demoted in 2015, along with other top Secret Service leaders. After retiring from government, Pupillo remained friendly with Jim Biden, the president's brother, testified at his impeachment inquiry interview. Then in 2017, Hunter Biden asked his uncle to accompany him to Hong Kong for a meeting with Ho, an executive working on behalf of the Chinese energy firm CEFC, according to the interview transcript. At the time, Jim and Hunter Biden had been working with CEFC to help the company source potential energy clients. So again, Jim and Hunter Biden had been working with CEFC, whom Ho is associated with, but they never discussed what he and Ho talked about. Come on, people, just follow along. It sounds stupid? Yes, it is stupid. In the course of those dealings, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowed from accounts associated with CEFC and its then chairman, Yi Jinping, to accounts associated with Jim and Hunter Biden. According to findings based on subpoena bank records released in recent years by congressional Republicans, Hunter Biden has testified that his dealings with CEFC were completely legitimate and completely, 100% in line with my experience and my abilities. And Jim Biden has described the episode as a straightforward business venture. So how can Jim Biden explain it as a straightforward business venture when he didn't talk to Hunter about it? Follow along, people. In advance to the trip, Jim Biden testified he hired Pupillo to investigate Ho. I wanted to know who I was meeting with and if there were any complications at all, he said. Pupillo's background check came back clean. Jim Biden testified. At the time, Ho was under Justice Department investigation for bribing African officials to advance CEFC's interests, a fact that came to light soon after the Hong Kong meeting when Ho was arrested upon arrival in New York and later convicted on corruption charges. The hiring of Pupillo and the purpose of the Hong Kong meeting was subjected to extended scrutiny in Jim Biden's congressional interview. A Republican staffer voiced a suspicion that the real reason Pupillo was hired was to provide intelligence about the Justice Department's probe that could then be communicated to Ho face-to-face. Was this person used to investigate Patrick Ho to try and identify whether or not there was a federal investigation before you and Hunter Biden went out to go visit Patrick Ho so that you could inform Patrick Ho if there was an indictment or a federal investigation? Maybe that was under seal, the staffer asked. Absolutely not, Jim Biden responded. This was for my personal edification because I do not like to walk into blind buildings, okay? Jim Biden also volunteered his belief that Pupillo did not exploit any access to sensitive sources in his investigation. He didn't use any special, relationships, Jim Biden testified. To the best of my knowledge, he was a very ethical guy, but he got demoted from the Secret Service. He added, though, that he did not know how Pupillo vetted Ho. What means did he use to gain his knowledge? I have no idea, Jim Biden testified. He's a professional. He's a friend. So again, Jim Biden sends this guy out to do an investigation, but he asks him no questions about the investigation. Jim Biden's kind of a dumbass if he don't ask people questions about things, don't you think? And we know Jim Biden's not a dumbass, so it's ridiculous. So anyway,
he might be clever in a scandalous kind of way, but he's a 10-watt bulb looking at him and listening to him talk. He pretty much is,
Absolutely. So Jim Biden, though, said he did not know what the purpose of the Hong Kong meeting was. Are you kidding me, people? He said
Hong Kong with no itinerary. Okay.
And he said he participated in the trip only to provide support for his troubled nephew and that he never asked about the substance of his meeting with Ho. I mean, you're supporting the guy. You're not asking him anything you need help on. What's going on? This is so ridiculous. And any Democrat that believes this, I'm going to say it right now, you're a fucking meathead. So anyway, it's odd, suggested a Republican staffer, that you would go to such lengths to hire a private investigator to look into Patrick Ho, but then you wouldn't even just ask Hunter Biden, your relative, like, why are we going and who is this guy? The way that we deal in my family, it wasn't odd, Jim Biden responded. To others, it might be. For Jim Biden, the habit of tapping his older brother's associates for business help dates back to Joe Biden's first Senate term. In 1975, Joe Biden's old law firm, Walsh, Monzak, and Owens, arranged an unsecured loan for Jim Biden's Delaware nightclub business from politically connected financer Norman Rales. A 1978 article about the arrangement in Wilmington's Sunday News Journal reported that after entering the Senate, Joe Biden remained financially entangled with his old law partners who owed him $85,000 for his stake in the firm. In the years since, one of those law partners, Mel Monzak, has gone on to serve as Joe Biden's personal attorney and at times his campaign treasurer. His current firm, Monzak, Mirsky, and Browder, serves as the registered agent of Joe Biden's personal S corporation, Celtic Capri, which was formed in 2017 according to Delaware corporate records. Biden has routed income from activities including writing and speaking through Celtic Capri. According to his personal financial disclosures, in recent years, Monzak, who did not respond to requests for comment, has also served as Jim Biden's personal attorney, according to the younger Biden's testimony. That's complicated at least one controversy about the extent to which Joe Biden's relatives have involved him in their business dealings. Politico previously reported on the accounts of 3 former executives at AmeriCorps, a troubled hospital chain that Jim Biden worked closely with, who said that Jim Biden spoke of various plans to involve his older brother in the company. One of the executives told Politico, now remember, people, Politico is far left.
It's critical.
They have nothing to do with Republicans, bias, or right. So one of the executives told Politico that Jim Biden, who was negotiating for a large equity stake in AmeriCorps in 2018, said at the time that his older brother would get a piece of the company too. When asked about the executive's account during his congressional testimony, the younger Biden's response was adamant. That is ridiculous on its face, he told investigators. While there was talk of an equity deal, he said, Joe Biden had nothing to do with it. Joe Biden's personal attorney is another matter. A June 2018 email shows that Monzak helped negotiate a proposed deal that would have given Jim Biden's company 35% of AmeriCorps. In the email, part of a cache of internal AmeriCorps documents obtained exclusively by Politico, Monzak wrote to AmeriCorps' outside counsel, "We represent Jim Biden and Lion Hall Group and requested a half dozen changes to the proposed deal." The email's recipient, Christopher Anderson, formerly of Jones Day, did not respond to requests for comment. Jim Biden testified that he walked away from the equity deal over concerns about AmeriCorps' finances. The White House did not respond to a question about Monzak, and Jim Biden told congressional investigators he does not know the full extent of Monzak's legal work for his brother. I don't have the full depth of what he does or doesn't do, Jim Biden told investigators, but I know that he's intricately involved and has been, for the last 40 or 50 years. In Joe Biden's final years in the Senate and for most of his vice presidency, Fran Person was by his side as body man and confidant. Known as Franny in Biden's inner circle, Person was like a son to Joe and Joe Biden. The future First Lady told Politico in 2014, during his time in vice president's office, Person kept Hunter Biden in the loop on the details of his father's movement. According to Hunter Biden's leaked emails obtained by Politico, emails show that Person also occasionally consulted Hunter Biden on political questions, including discussion of which labor leaders to invite to the vice president's second term swearing in 2013. After leaving government in 2014, Person went into business with Harv's Corporation, a Chinese real estate developer, according to emails. Person was soon working to line up deals with Hunter Biden, according to the emails, which show him pitching his former boss's son on a plan to develop SeaWorld parks in China in conjunction with Harv's and the state-owned China Development Bank in 2015. A series of WhatsApp messages between Person and Hunter Biden from the summer of 2017 show that discussions of potential partnerships lasted for years and included offers of personal financial help for Hunter Biden from Person's Chinese business partner, Harv's executive Bo Zhang. The messages were included in an exhibit provided to the House and Ways and Means Committee by IRS Special Agent Joseph Ziegler, who investigated Hunter Biden's tax matters. Ziegler said in an affidavit that the WhatsApp messages summarized in the exhibit were obtained via search warrants. In the messages, Hunter Biden detailed his daunting personal debts, while Person expressed a desire to work with Hunter Biden and said that Zhang was eager to provide the financially distressed political scion with monetary assistance. I've got one loyalty, brother. That's to my family. Your family, Person, who did not respond to requests for comment, wrote in one July 27, 2017 message. I talked to Bo previously about the $37,000. He didn't flinch. I will talk to him about $56,000 and possibly $100,000. It really depends on his liquid assets in the U.S. I will ask. His only problem is getting large sums out of China, especially right now. Neither Zhang nor a lawyer who recently represented him in an unrelated lawsuit, Jonathan Pavoni of Squire Patton Boggs, responded to requests for comment. The next day, Hunter Biden asked if money had been sent, the messages show. In response, Person assured him that Zhang had just been to the bank and extended an invitation on his Chinese partner's behalf. He also mentioned, Parsons wrote, that you should take a trip to China sometime this month to just get away for a week or so. Just decompress. The messages do not make clear how much money, if any, Hunter Biden ultimately received from Zhang. During his vice presidency, Joe Biden leaned on his son's business partner, Eric Schwerin, to manage his personal finances. Schwerin, who met Hunter Biden when they both worked in the Clinton administration Commerce Department, went on to work as his lobbying partner. At the beginning of the Obama administration, the pair co founded Rosemont Seneca Partners, an investment and consulting firm. Schwerin also oversaw Rosemont's finances and helped manage Hunter Biden's personal finances. In those roles, Schwerin participated in and managed the tax implications of some of Hunter Biden's controversial overseas dealings. During the Obama years, Schwerin took over Joe Biden's bookkeeping as well. He told congressional impeachment investigators in January, saying that the volunteer role entailed bill paying and tax preparation. Schwerin testified that Hunter Biden did not cover expenses for his father. I do not recall anything, he said. It's possible there were small things here and there, but I don't recall anything major, Schwerin added, when that Hunter Biden paid for a family cell phone plan used by his father and that his father would reimburse him for it. Meanwhile, Schwerin's day job kept him involved in Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings. In one episode, Schwerin referred Burisma, a Ukrainian energy firm that installed Hunter Biden on its board in 2014, as it navigated corruption allegations, to the Democratic lobbying firm Blue Star Strategies for help with government relations, according to his testimony. The referral worked out. Blue Star helped Burisma fend off a corruption investigation in Ukraine before its work with the energy firm itself became the subject of a Justice Department probe. Blue Star belatedly registered as a foreign agent, but the DOJ probe was reportedly closed with no finding of wrongdoing. In his testimony, Schwerin said that he saw no intermingling between the then vice president's finances and his relative's business ventures. I am not aware of any financial transactions or compensation that Vice President Biden received related to business conducted by any of his family members or their associates, he said, nor any involvement by him in their businesses. As the vice president's physician during the Obama administration, Army Doctor Kevin O'Connor grew close to his primary patient. Bonds with the rest of the Bidens deepened over the course of the Obama administration, as O'Connor, who now serves as Biden's White House physician, assisted in the treatment of Beau Biden's fatal brain cancer. In 2017, when Jim Biden sought to build a healthcare empire in conjunction with AmeriCorps, he enlisted O'Connor's help, according to emails obtained by Politico and Jim Biden's impeachment inquiry interview. As part of his work with AmeriCorps, Jim Biden wanted to partner with the Veterans Affairs Department to use vacant space at rural hospitals to treat veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, according to his testimony. As an example of the value he brought to AmeriCorps, Jim Biden testified that he sought help from O'Connor, who introduced him to a team of people involved in treating PTSD on military bases. Our first lunch was in Alexandria, Virginia, he testified. It is unclear whether the initiative progressed beyond initial talks. O'Connor did not respond to requests for comment left with him at George Washington University, where he is listed as an associate professor, and the White House did not respond to a request to make him available for an interview. Emails obtained by Politico show that Jim Biden and O'Connor also met with the head of a Pennsylvania hospital that AmeriCorps was in the process of acquiring in July of 2017. You and your team clearly share our vision, O'Connor wrote to the hospital administrator, Beverly Anarumo, after the meeting, copying Jim Biden on the note, and I look forward to seeing you again in the coming months. Now, all this to me is it's clear as day. And for anybody to sit there and say that there's no ties here, no commingling, they didn't talk about anything, I mean, I don't know what to say, Bill, but that is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I just broke down succinctly how they're all tied. Same financial planner, same accountant, same attorney, but they didn't discuss anything. Everything's commingled, but they never talk to each other. How ridiculous do you think all of this is, Bill?
Well, let's not overlook the most obvious thing here, okay? And you open with it, and of course I retain everything that you just discussed, which is a lot. But if Politico is even talking about this is one of the Democrats' great linebackers. You know, they're defensive linemen for the Democratic Party. They're the guys that keep the guy away from the players away from the quarterback. You know, I mean, they've been running defense for Joe and well, let's face it, Obama too, forever, because they don't want this stuff getting out. So the fact that a liberal media outlet not only is they're not reluctantly covering his story, they did a big story there. Okay, so this just proves that people are turning a little bit, or at least, dare I say, waking up a little bit.
They want him out, Bill.
Yeah, well, they should, because they can see that he's floundering at best. But as you know, I've been spending a lot of time with a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, and what I've noticed is it isn't a lack of knowledge or understanding. It's a lack of willingness to admit. You and I will look at both candidates. We lean Republican. We're definitely not going to vote Democrat, but we would vote for a good candidate regardless of where they come from, because we'll look at the person. We're able to look at the good and the bad, but the left tends to just obfuscate the bad and just keep telling yourself and telling you that it's not true until even they believe it. So the fact that this comes from the source that it does is amazing. So that leads me to the next thing. Okay, so now liberals are going to read this. Are they going to believe it? Probably not. Okay, because they're so dug in about this stuff that they don't want to do it. But this is not a matter of following the money. This is a matter of follow the resume. All you got to do is just see who these people have worked with over time, and you branch out, and you find that lobbyists and lawyers and accountants and advisors and even some shadier roles, if you will, like PIs, they all tie everything together. Some good, but not incredible, investigative work is revealing a lot of really amazing stuff here about these connections. And it really comes down to this. I don't want to belabor the subject because I can't say much more than you already did. The fact is that with everything that's been presented there, in addition to everything that's been talked about, when they've been investigating the connections with the big guy, 10% for the big guy, and real money. I mean, Hunter's on trial right now for something relatively small. Okay, well, we're looking at how influence peddling and pay for play and millions upon millions of dollars given to family of the sitting president to do what? God knows what the money was for. All this stuff just proves that people simply just don't want to believe it. And if you talk about it, then you're a Biden hater and you're you're just a Trumper and all that. No, we said it a million times. We just want the truth. We want to know what's actually happening. And that's all I have to say on this. It's all there, Steve. There's probably 100 more examples like this.
Well, even cooler. I haven't gotten into this, but I'm going to do it as a side note. They did more investigation in the impeachment inquiry, and they got some more bank records, and they found money in the ranks of another 3 million, another 7 million, 3 million from Ukraine, 7 million from China, 1 million from Romania, and another million from somewhere else. I don't recall exactly. So they're now digging up lots of money with these bank records. So people, there's no evidence, huh? None at all. But we'll move on here at the We Are Marshall podcast. If you would go to Rumble, download the Rumble app. It is free. And go search and find the We Are Marshall podcast and like, share, and subscribe so you can get notification of our new episodes. Now, Bill's going to jump in and go into topic 2 here. Like we said, go right ahead, Bill. This is your segment.
All right. So let's talk about the events of Saturday. Saturday was an interesting day because there was a scheduled gay pride event. You can't say gay pride event, just a pride event in Washington. And there's also a planned protest, which drew thousands of people. And I'll get into this more in my second segment, but let's just say that the people were not there peacefully. They were defacing public property, and they were damaging things, and they were writing stuff that wasn't pro-Palestinian. They were writing stuff that's pro-Hamas all over things like River to the Sea and all that crap. Well, little did they know that while they were having this protest, which I will get into a little bit later, Israel conducted a very rare and very risky and very surgically precision, and this is the words of the people who carried it out, strike within Gaza, within a refugee camp, I might add, to extract 4 hostages that have been taken, that have been 240 something days. They've been hostages since October 7th, and the initial attack on Israel, in 2 separate houses in Gaza, which were right across the street from each other, about 200 meters apart. So what happened was, in a very busy Gaza neighborhood, there was 3 men and 1 woman that were rescued simultaneously and successfully. But there was a lot of shooting, a lot of casualties, and hence a lot of uproar over it. This was described as a mission that required the precision of brain surgery. Now, nobody was expecting it because raids like this do not happen during the day. There's usually too much of a risk of civilian civilian activity because people tend to be out during the day. And also, it's also very difficult to be stealth when during the daylight. So it was a bold, very, very carefully timed precision operation, and it seemed to have gone off perfectly as planned. That's how they described it as far as the complexity of it. The meticulous planning and coordination successfully freed the hostages. It was surrounded by Hamas gunmen and thousands of Palestinian civilians, and they were all inside locked. Hostages were all inside locked rooms, being guarded by 1 armed militant each room. And outside the door, according to Israel, were the families of the militants, including wives and children, living together with their captive. Another important point here is that these were houses. These are residences. These were not municipal buildings or government buildings. These are people who are complicit in the hostage taking, and they were private residences that were being used to house these 4 hostages.
Okay, let me pause you for 1 second so you can make a very good point in your story. You're about to land it, but you need to say it. Those people that were civilian what?
Civilian
What people were
Palestinians.
they? They were what?
Palestinians.
Oh, they were Palestinian people.
Yes.
So you're saying that the Palestinian people helped Hamas hide the hostages. Is that what you're saying?
I was going to come out and say it, but I like the way you just did that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
because
interesting. That's all.
Yeah, it is, and it was going to be addressed in a couple of different ways. But yeah, let's get that out there. Okay, these are the people that are supposedly oppressed by Hamas and don't dare speak up against Hamas because they'd be in retribution. Well, it turns out they're loaning out their houses and their manpower and their families, and I wouldn't be surprised if almost everybody there was in support of the hostages being held as hostages. So yeah, that's a particularly interesting thing to focus on. Absolutely. So what happened was, obviously, the forces stormed both buildings simultaneously, working in exact sync. It was relatively straightforward, but major gun battles erupted, and they estimated at 274 to 276 civilian casualties as of this point. So the rescue effort has been described by the military as the most complex and daring hostage missions to date in this conflict. And Israeli leadership considers it a success. And it took weeks of planning, and the United States helped with intelligence, but we did not have any boots on the ground in this situation. But it does underscore the challenges faced by Israel when it comes to bringing home hostages, of which there's still over 100 unaccounted for. And we do not believe that they're all alive. We believe many are dead now. So like I said, it happened during the day, very brave, very unusual. It put the soldiers in particular at great risk. And the military had said that they had considered trying to rescue the hostages in just one building and leave the other. But they knew that the likelihood of the other hostages surviving, if that should happen, were very slim. So they ended up getting them all. So they had practiced for weeks. And they practiced every scenario they could play out. And then, like I said, they did it. But they left a hell of a scene of chaos, destruction, and death behind them. And they say that, like I said, about 270, including women and children, casualties overflowing the available hospitals in Gaza. And Israel says they only knew of about 100. So let's face it, it's very possible that the numbers are skewed. Obviously, the Palestinians are going to say that there was more, and it makes sense that Israel will say there was less. The fact is, though, is that the act itself has caused condemnation worldwide. Everybody's an armchair general now saying how they would have done things differently, and they were outraged. And Steve, I'm just going to go get right to it. Okay, I don't need to belabor this story very much. Okay, the fact is that people continue to fail to recognize that if Israel is to do anything, it's going to involve casualties of civilian nature. They can't do any other way because they are hiding people in civilian areas for that very reason. They are challenging Israel to kill people and get blamed for war crimes and all this stuff. They make it impossible to have a military. There are rules to war. It sounds crazy, but there are rules to war. And one rule is you don't put hostages in hospitals or in schools, but they have been. And this is what's always been happening. And this is why they have as many casualties as they have, because they forced Israel to do the unspeakable. But in order to carry up the objective, which Israel remains resolute in, they had to do it that way. But of course, you have cries for war, about war criminals and all that. And unfortunately, this country is just completely divided right now of Israel. College campuses still are raging with disruptive protests. Our own politicians are, turning on their leader. It's caused tremendous amount of backlash for Mr. Biden, and the whole thing is just it's a PR nightmare. But people have to understand the details of this, and this is why I continue to talk about Israel, people, because the situation. If you listen to one person or another person, depending on what side you want to talk to, there's very few people right in the middle. The fact is that this is a country trying to defend itself and its people. This is what they have to do it, and this is what happens when they do it. So I'll leave it at that, Steve.
Well, couple points I want to stress. The two houses that the hostages were held in, one was a Palestinian doctor. The other was an Al Jazeera photographer.
Yeah, I tried for time. I left that out, but yeah,
it's okay. This is why we got
Al Jazeera. Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're supposed to be a moderate network within the Arab community.
Well, we've known better for years, but they can state that. They do state
that. We do, but the same sheeple that we keep talking about, they don't seem to,
But I don't know, Bill. Things are breaking now because the AP came out today saying that Hamas has been cooking the books on deaths and putting even Hamas military-age young men in as civilian casualties.
Sure. That makes sense.
We knew this. Israel's been saying it. Now the Associated Press is validating it. Okay?
Makes perfect
sense. And the only other thing I got to interject on this, which to me is the most ridiculous and hypocritical thing of this whole situation, okay? There's major protests in D.C. right now about this.
Yep. Yeah.
They're in there saying, kill the Jews. They're preaching this in the protests. It's okay to say kill the Jews, but God forbid if you run over a pride flag, you're going to jail. What the hell is going on?
Well, that's part of my second segment.
Okay, well, you can get into it. I just sorry if I stole any thunder, but
no, please. I like the back and forth, and that's great.
That's just simply ridiculous. Here we are. This is the main theme I think we need to go about right now between, say, the Republicans and the Democrats is hypocrisy. The hypocrisy is disgusting amongst these two people right now, these two organizations. It's definitely more on the left right now. It's disgusting, and we'll have to see. But continue
the lack of education among people that unfortunately are going to cast a ballot. That's what scares me the most.
Well, that too, but I mean education or in being informed in general, because you don't need a college degree in education to get some common sense. You just need to pay attention and remove your bias from it and look at it for what it is.
Well, isn't that really right there the main point of everything we're talking about tonight?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Okay.
All of it.
So here at the We Are Marshall podcast, we've covered a couple segments, and we're going to keep going on. Mine is going to continue to be left media topics that want Biden gone. And this next one, I'm going to that when we were watching Trump, there was actually a ticker on every lie he told or mistruth. Nothing like that has been done with Biden, but here we go. Biden loves to tell.
Oh,
Okay, Biden. This is from a left-wing newspaper. Okay,
love it.
the New York Post. Biden loves to tell tall tales. We cut them down to size. So let me reiterate that what I'm about to get to. I didn't cut them down to size. The left wing media cut them down to size. In President Biden's telling, he was a teenage civil rights activist, a former trucker, the first in his family to go to college, and the nephew of a cannibalism victim. All of these claims stretch the truth or are downright false. Now, this is one line I want to read. Even though they're calling them out, they say they're not lies, they're stretches of the truth, or they're just false. But with Trump, it was a lie. Lie, everything. Stretch the truth with Biden, though. But Mr. Biden persists in telling personal tales, listen to this, with rhetorical flourishes and factual liberty when he works a room or regales an audience. They are a way to connect with voters, emphasize his middle-class Joe persona, and charm his audience. So when Trump does that, there's no charm. There's no emphasis of middle-class stuff. It's not Trump trying to connect with voters. Only the hypocrisy of the left saying that only Biden does that. Ridiculous, as I've been saying. But despite Mr. Biden's penchant for exaggerating details when recounting episodes from his life, these autobiographical embellishments differ in scale and significance from the stream of lies, lies, from a stolen election peddled by his opponent, former President Donald J. Trump. A White House spokesman, Andrew Bates, said that Mr. Biden had brought honesty and integrity back to the White House and that he shared life experiences that had shaped his outlook. Here are some of the president's most repeated yarns, connecting with his audience through hyperbole. They don't say he's liar. Oh, he's just connecting with his audience through hyperbole. I need you all to see this on how the media spins it for one but not the other. Hypocrisy. So, what was said? In our last debate when I was 29 years old, the first question he was asked at the debate was, "Do you have any regrets, Senator Boggs?" And he said, "No." Then we came to the very end of the debate where I spoke, and then he was to conclude. He stood up and he said, I was asked if I had any regrets. I said no, but I have one. Had Joe Biden gone to the Naval Academy when I appointed him, he'd still have 7 months left on and wouldn't be able to run. In a May commencement speech at West Point Military Academy, Mr. Biden has repeatedly recounted this tale to graduating cadets at various military academies and to families of service members. In high school in the 1960s, he had been nominated to attend the United States Naval Academy by Senator J. Caleb Boggs of Delaware, his Republican opponent in his first Senate race. Mr. Boggs, Mr. Biden sometimes adds, later lamented that Mr. Biden had declined to accept the nomination in a 1972 debate. It is an anecdote that dates as far back as 2010 when Mr. Biden, in a speech that Mr. Boggs had considered him for the Academy. It is possible that this nomination occurred, but the New York Times could not verify Mr. Biden's claim. So again, see, there's the hypocrisy. You can't verify the claim, but, it is possible that this nomination occurred. Come on, people. The Academy does not have any records of Mr. Biden receiving a nomination or an appointment, said a spokeswoman, Ashley Hockeyako, but it does not possess preliminary applications or requests made from congressional offices. Mr. Boggs started his first term as senator in January 1961. If the current deadline is any indication, members of Congress have until January 31st to submit nominations to the Naval Academy. Mr. Biden graduated from high school that June and began his first semester at the University of Delaware that fall. The Delaware Historical Society, which houses Mr. Boggs' Senate records, could find only his nominations to the Naval Academy from 62. Mr. Biden's name was not on that list. Similarly, the Times was unable to verify Mr. Biden's retelling of that 1972 debate. Newspaper articles detailing debates and events attended by Mr. Biden and Mr. Boggs in September and October of that year did not mention any questions about regrets or the nomination. In his 2007 autobiography, Promises to Keep, Mr. Biden wrote of only one debate and did not include any reference to the nomination. It is also unclear what Mr. Boggs and Mr. Biden telling could have meant by suggesting Mr. Biden would have still been committed to the Academy or the armed services for another 7 months. Cadets at the Naval Academy attend for 4 years and serve for at least 5 years in the Navy or Marines after graduation. Had Mr. Biden attended the Academy instead of the University of Delaware in 1961, he would have still been able to run against Mr. Boggs in 72. So they tore apart that he said that, if you noticed, right? They tore it apart, but they said, well, it could have happened, even after they went through a slew of documented proof that it didn't happen. This is the ridiculousness of how the media protects the left. Pay attention, people. I got more. So what was said? I used to drive an 18-wheeler at an April campaign event in Florida. Mr. Biden often repeats this claim when attending events with union members. The White House cited Mr. Biden's job driving a school bus during law school in the 70s. He also took a 500-mile trip as a senator on a cargo truck. That makes him a truck driver? I'm going to think no, Bill. What do you think?
They didn't even have 18 wheels back then. First of all, it was all 14 wheels. They had the 18th where they went to 48-foot trailers. First of all, and this is there's so many of these, in particular on his civil rights record.
But the best is what I'm getting you to is from a left-leaning media outlet. Okay,
it's about time they cover this stuff.
Exactly, they want them out. This is why they're throwing them to the wolves now. They want them out. So let's go to another
not just
one.
The media.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry.
So what was said? As a matter of fact, the first organization I ever joined was the NAACP. Didn't get to vote until you were 21 in those days, but I got involved in civil rights when I was 15 at an NCAAP event in Michigan in May. She said, remember when they were desegregating Linfield, the neighborhood? It was 70 homes built, suburbia. And I told you there was a black family moving in and people were down there protesting. I told you not to go down there, and you went down. Remember that? And you got arrested standing on the porch with a black family in an interview with Howard Stern in April. For decades, Mr. Biden has occasionally suggested that he played a greater role in the civil rights movement than he actually did. Oh, so he lied. Why don't you say that, people? While there is corroboration of Mr. Biden's participation Go ahead.
He suggested that he played a larger role than he did. Jesus Christ, that's the most sugar and sugarcoating I've ever heard in my entire life.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. The whole point of this segment for me is to show you the difference between how the media portrays a Democrat and how the media portrays a Republican. So I want people to pay attention because this stuff is damning.
So again, dancing around it. Keep going.
Yep. For decades, Mr. Biden has occasionally suggested that he played a greater role in the civil rights movement than he actually did. While there is corroboration of Mr. Biden's participation in a few desegregation events, he has also said he would not consider himself an activist in the movement. There is no evidence that he was ever arrested. The White House said that there are countless moments in any person's life that local newspapers opt not to cover, and that Mr. Biden was proud to have stood up against segregation in his youth. The Washington Post detailed several other instances of the anecdote Mr. Biden is relaying, through his mother, of his arrest as a teenager while protesting for civil rights. In some cases, Mr. Biden has said he was 13 or that the police brought him home. Local newspapers reported that in spring of 1959, when Mr. Biden was 16, a black family moved into an all-white neighborhood in Wilmington, prompting residents to protest against integration. Police officers described the demonstrators as a mob, some armed with firebombs, and arrested 7 people, including 4 teenagers for possessing fireworks. The house was bombed and destroyed later that year. Mr. Biden joined the NAACP during his first political race for Newcastle County Council in '70, when he was in his late 20s, according to the 2019 Washington Post article that included an interview with the former president of the Delaware NAACP, highlighting and exaggerating his middle-class roots, is the next one. So what was said? I'm the first in my family ever to go to college at a May campaign event in Detroit. Mr. Biden described his maternal grandfather, Ambrose Finnegan Sr., as the only person in the House with a college degree in his 2007 autobiography. According to Mr. Finnegan's 1957 obituary, he attended and played football for Santa Clara College in California. Mr. Biden was previously said that he was the first on the Biden side of the family to go to college. What was said? Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay any additional penny. I hope you are all able to make $400,000. I never did, at an April campaign event in Pennsylvania. She said, "Did you read today's paper?" I said. "They don't have today's paper, Wilmington Paper, Delaware, where I'm with Leahy up in Vermont." And she said, "Well, let me read it. Top of the fold, headline, Biden, poorest man in Congress, at a March campaign event in Nevada." For much of his political career, Mr. Biden was among the least wealthy members of Congress, with a net worth of negative 166,500. Mr. Biden has listed by the newspaper Roll Call as the poorest member in 1990, the first year it began compiling net worth rankings. The news journal based in Wilmington reported the ranking on page 33, not the front page. He continued to rank near the bottom for net worth throughout his decades-long career in the Senate. According to Mr. Biden's tax returns, he and his wife Jill earned less than $400,000 almost every year from 1998 to 2016, but they earned more than $400,000 in 2013, and every year since 2017, ranging from $408,733 in 2013 to more than $11 million in 2017. The president's yearly salary under federal law is $400,000. Wow. So stories that are too good to be true. What was said? Ambrose Finnegan, we called him Uncle Bossy. He was shot down. He was Army Air Corps before he was Air Force. He flew single-engine planes, reconnaissance flights over New Guinea. He had volunteered because someone couldn't make it. He got shot down in an area where there were a lot of cannibals in New Guinea at the time, in remarks to reporters in April. In his 2007 autobiography, Mr. Biden wrote that he often heard family lore about his hero uncle, Ambrose Finnegan Jr., who was a pilot during World War II, but his suggestion that Mr. Finnegan was shot down and cannibalized in New Guinea is not supported by military records or anthropologists. According to the agency of the Pentagon that accounts for the missing or those taken prisoner during war, Mr. Finnegan, a second lieutenant, was a passenger on an aircraft that crashed into the ocean on the north coast of New Guinea in May 1944 after its engines failed. 3 men, including Mr. Biden's uncle, were lost in the crash, while a fourth was rescued by a passing barge. There are no indications that the plane was shot down or that Mr. Finnegan was flying the plane. Did that sole survivor cannibalize all 3 of the other people? Maybe. Who knows? But Mr. Finnegan would have been an unlikely victim of cannibalism in New Guinea. Anthropologists and locals told PolitiFact and The Guardian studies of cannibalism in the country have noted that victims tended to be enemies from warring tribes as an act of revenge or deceased relatives as part of a mourning ritual. Mr. Biden shared his accounts of Mr. Finnegan's death after visiting a war memorial in Scranton, PA, that bore his uncle's name. The story was meant to highlight Mr. Biden's commitment to equipping those troops and honoring veterans there. So I'm not going to keep going in. There is one more, and it is just basically stating that he traveled 1.2 million miles on Air Force Two, and one of these guys told him that, "Oh yeah, you carried that on a train, so don't worry about it, Joey baby." He said so. I mean, the bottom line is we see that Joe Biden embellishes everything. But then what we see is if Trump embellished anything, it's a lie. He's a scumbag. He's this. But Biden does it Oh, he's just trying to charm the voters and speak rhetoric and in hyperbole to woo them to his side. No, he fucking lies. I'm so sick of you Democrat media people and your bullshit. Tell the truth for once, okay? You hid it from us until the internet hit. Now we have all these stories for us to look at you people like you're a bunch of damn clowns. Tell the truth, deliver the information to the public, and enough of your shenanigans. We don't give a shit about the Republican or the Democratic Party. We care about America. What do you think, Bill?
First of all, Steve, I think you should stop holding back and really start telling us how you feel. You're gonna get an ulcer. You keep doing
Oh man, it's got to be said, man, and it's got to be
no,
said in harsh words because
because
no one seems to
no,
get it.
it's outrageous, Steve. Okay, it's outrageous, and frankly, it's insulting to an. I would like to consider myself an intelligent consumer as well as a voter. And I'm not using the word intelligent in a lofty way. I just mean the capacity to critically think and make good decisions based upon what I hear. You know, and it's an insult that somebody can actually say these things without being called on because anybody in any walk of life, professionally, socially, I mean, with the exception of a grandfather telling his grandkids tall tales, it's unacceptable outside of that arena.
Listen, Joe Biden's not the father in Big Fish, okay? That's
No,
not who he is. I mean, that's a good analogy.
Albert Finney, yeah, that
Yep.
is. The thing is, it's insulting because it's something's either true or it's not. But you know, Joe Biden has. I've been following these pretty rapidly for a long time, and he's done it. He's been caught a bunch of times, and how easily he was forgiven just shocked me. But what's really been happening that bothers me most about this is now that he is in danger of losing ground with Latinos and blacks, which I think it's a fair statement to say that when it comes to election cycles, the Democrats pretty much always consider the blacks and Latinos a lock. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah. So they'll go into the black neighborhoods and they'll talk to the preachers and the community leaders and all that, and remind them of what they've done for them. And no one has ever had the ball to say, "Well, excuse me, Mr. Biden, but you Democrats only come around once every 4 years. You make a lot of promises, but you don't do anything." And Trump actually had a lot of prominent black leaders saying things like, the black community has improved under Donald Trump. But I don't want to get off my topic yet. Now that he's courting and what's really what he's really doing is trying to salvage the black vote. He's terrified. All of a sudden, he's Mr. Civil Rights. Well, I'm glad you hit on it because I was going to. But the civil rights stuff is where he is the worst because that's insulting. I mean, it's almost false valor.
Well, that's what he did with that Naval Academy. I almost mentioned that phrase of false valor.
Yeah, you're military, okay?
Yeah.
I would never insult you by claiming that I did anything in the military that I didn't. I was in basic training in ROTC and I dropped out for health reasons. That's why I discovered I had kidney disease. I'm not going to tell you that I made it to AIT, that I did a special training. I wanted to drive tanks, but I never got that far. I am not a military, I'm not registered as someone who served in the armed forces. So I wouldn't do that. But he's out there as a champion of the civil rights movement, and he's been continued. His aides have even said, "Joe, you got to stop saying this." And one of them was the arrest. There was no arrest. The other one was the one you mentioned about being 15 years old. He claimed he marched. He didn't. He gave a date. It wasn't even the date of an event. It was like way after something had occurred. But this is the guy who has a documented history of racism, okay? He voted against busing in the 70s, okay? He said, and I quote, "I don't want my kids going to school in a racial jungle." Quote, okay? Then he was also, when they did an episode where he was aligning himself with some big players in the Senate a long time ago, there was an episode of mass incarceration that they wanted to have him come down on it to help fix it. And instead, he said, and I quote, "Lock the sons of bitches up," after he was told in public, in front of a microphone, how much of the demographic he was talking about was black and minority. Okay. "Lock the sons of bitches up." That's a quote. Okay. This guy, he's horrible on race. He has consistently made racial comments and demeaning remarks insensitive remarks and just downright stupid remarks, and he got a complete pass. So yes, Steve, I'm glad that we're pointing out all this stuff because
Look at when he was on Charlemagne the God's podcast.
oh my God, yeah, that was
He
bad.
looked at Charlemagne the God, who was a black man, who has a very popular podcast. He's doing
Oh,
great. And he looks at him and says, if you
Does good
don't
work.
vote for me, you're not black. To
Yeah.
a black man. I mean, what
But-
the? You can't make this
look
stuff
what they're
up.
dealing with, though, Steve. They did an investigation on him of his mental acuity, and they said he's a kindly old man with diminished mental capacity.
So we won't prosecute.
But this is the president of the United States. We're not talking about a guy who gets coffee for the members of Congress. This is the guy with the football.
Yep.
This is the guy who's the leader of the free world. He has diminished capacity, and that's okay. Well, my God, what if a Republican ever had that kind of evaluation and someone said that? They'd raise the roof. They'd call for impeachment. They'd be invoking the 25th Amendment.
In 2 seconds.
And they'd probably march on Washington over that. And I was insulted by that because I'm like, that's the president of the United States. And now I have to worry about them playing politics with this country. The world's on fire right now.
Oh, and then
he's
of
getting a pass.
And then of course they attack Robert Hur and say that he mischaracterized it, but they won't release the tapes for us to look at them. And it came out in court just the other day that the White House manipulated the transcripts of those depositions. They admitted it in court.
Of course they did.
But let's move on this subject, Bill, so we can jump into your next topic here at the We Are Marshall podcast. Go right ahead on your next segment.
Let's talk about the fallout of Saturday's hostage rescue mission. As we know, as I discussed earlier, the Saturday raid on Gaza happened during daylight, and it happened simultaneously to when Washington was being bombarded with thousands of protesters who were vandalizing. And the particular thing they did was they had a large swath of red cloth on which they laid upon the ground, covered a lot of ground with it. And it was basically their red line for Joe Biden to call for a ceasefire. Cute, right? It was pretty heavy to watch, but so you have that going on. You still have the college, all the college happening. You have the Senate, you have Democratic senators and Congress people out there railing against Israel and borderline supporting Hamas. And this is what the reaction was. Okay, the numbers came out about how many people were supposedly killed, and what, of course, that they were Palestinian. They say 64 children and over 700 Palestinians injured in addition. Okay, so Hamas Gaza Health Ministry, they have accused Israel of committing a complex war crime during the attack on the refugee camp. Again, hostages being hidden in a refugee camp because they thought that Israel wouldn't go in there. No, they did. But the big thing is that what's going on inside the United States now and what's going on inside Israel. A lot of protests inside Israel right now. As of Saturday afternoon, that was happening as well. And it shows that my prediction many months ago, October, that people, even the Israelis, don't have the heart for such a conflict is definitely coming true, because the fact is that even the Israelis now are starting to cave, and they're saying that they just want to deal with Hamas. They want something just to make the fighting stop. And this includes, not necessarily recovering hostages. This includes not necessarily putting an end to the fighting, not eradicating the elements of Hamas that will continue to attack Israel if given the ability. And it led even so much to the point where Benny Gantz, who was a high-ranking minister in the War Department, he resigned from the unity government of Netanyahu, citing failure in the war on Gaza and calling for early elections. So they're already talking about elections again, and Netanyahu is looking increasingly alone on this whole thing, when I think most reasonable people will agree that despite the carnage, he has still maintained the moral high ground and has still continued to do what he said he was going to do, which is, take note, Mr. Biden, protecting the citizens of his country. But we have world condemnation, Indonesia, Turkey, and other countries that don't matter. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Heavily critical of Israel's bombing campaign. But the United States, of course, is getting involved because Joe Biden, in addition to his administration taking tremendous heat over this conflict, he's also facing a lot of challenges to his ability to be reelected over this matter. So I hate to make it a political thing, but, well, let's face it, it is. Okay. So now we have the recovery of the hostages did little to settle criticism of Israel, and more particularly Netanyahu. The raid occurred during a massive protest, they said, and calls for ceasefires within hours of the news of the hostage rescue made public. Tens of thousands of Israelis are back on the streets of Tel Aviv. And they were, like I said, they're actually, even families of the hostages said, we just need a deal that can bring them all back, the living for rehabilitation and the murdered for burial. We just got to end this. And in the U.S., the conflict remains front and center at colleges. Still, everything going on. The whole protest in Washington was very public and very damaging. So Joe had already drafted a resolution, a UN resolution, to go before the Security Council. And in the time it took me to prepare this podcast today, the resolution passed. All right. So the UN Security Council officially passed it. And because Israel had already agreed in principle to abide by the terms if Hamas would do the same. And what we have now is a situation in which they're going to not have Israel have their hostages returned unilaterally. Now they're going to do hostage exchanges in which many, many Hamas prisoners taken by Israel are going to be released, which is going to just end up being blown up in everybody's face. And this happened. Like I said, it's been approved. And negotiations will be ongoing. And as long as they are in good faith, the fighting supposedly will stop. So the Biden administration had called for the United Nations Security Council to vote on the resolution, laying it out for an immediate truce. And Nate Evans, a spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN, said it was important that Hamas accept the proposal that Israel has accepted. If Israel has shown the good faith to accept it, Hamas has to as well, based upon the fact that both sides have the same amount of meat in the game, if you will, skin in the game. Israel has accepted the proposal, and the Security Council has an opportunity to speak with one voice and call on Hamas to do the same. And like I said, this afternoon it was approved. The terms are problematic, in my opinion, but it's not for me to say. And even though it passed, it's unclear whether there are any actual mechanisms for enforcement. So it's going to be a very thin, a very tenable, if you will, agreement. One of the powers of the resolution, it also puts on the council on record of support for a particular action. So it's a 3-page proposal that Biden laid out earlier this month that required the release of some Israeli hostages held by Hamas in exchange for a 6-week ceasefire. And Biden has called for the first phase to allow time for this diplomacy to move into the second. And then I guess of a particular note in this subject, and I'll let it die at that, is that Kamala Harris, along with members of the squad, are out there expressing great grief for the innocent Palestinians and just completely missing the point.
That held hostages.
Completely missing the point.
Completely.
Kamala Harris in Michigan, which is a
but
state.
they want you to. The only reason they're missing the point, Bill, is they want the votes from Michigan. That's it.
Of course. Yeah. No, exactly.
There's no other reason.
It also has one of the largest Muslim populations in the United States.
Dearborn, Michigan. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, this whole thing, I think that's just traitorous. You have to worry about the people, the bad guys. Okay, the bad guys here. I know a lot of conflicts are vague, and people don't know who the players are. This is very simple. Okay, you got whether you like the Israelis or not, you have a fairly peaceful people whose existence have an existential threat by a group known as Hamas. Everybody knows who they are, and we know what they're capable of. And they continue to blur the lines on this. And
It's mind blowing. The only thing I want to interject on this is Benny Gantz. He resigned from that war tribunal. He wants Netanyahu's job. This is what he's doing. He's playing politics. He sees Netanyahu weak. He's going for it.
Yeah, he sees blood in the water. Absolutely.
Yep. But the worst thing of this whole Israel situation, Israel's doing the right things and protecting their citizens, and they went in and saved some of their hostages. Meanwhile, Mr. Poop in his pants Biden, there's hostages, American hostages over there too. He ain't doing shit. They're just there. So ridiculous. So you guys can support this guy. I just can't do it anymore because if I was in the military and he left me behind, I mean, come on. Who the hell wants that? That's the way I look at this guy. But anyway, we're going to.
Ronald Reagan would tell you that one American life is too many. One.
Yep. So we'll move on. This is Bill's educational segment, This Day in History. Let's do a brief one on this, Bill, and then I'll jump right into the feel good.
Yeah, I'm not. We're over on time. I'm just gonna make this real brief, okay? My theme on Israel carried all the way through my This Day in History, and I'm just gonna touch on this real quick. If you don't know what the 6-Day War is between Israel and its Arab neighbors, you need to do a little bit of homework. In 1967, Israel was attacked by several countries, and in 6 days fended them all off very definitively in an absolute badass manner. Okay, the 6-Day War between Israel and its Arab neighbors ended on this day in 1967, where the United Nations brokered ceasefire. The outnumbered IDF achieved a swift victory in the brief war, rolling over the Arab coalition and more than doubling the amount of territory under Israel's control. So that backfired badly on the Arab countries that attacked them. The greatest fruit of victory lay in seizing the old city of Jerusalem from Jordan. Thousands of Jews wept while bent in prayer at the Second Temple's wailing Western Wall. So basically, I'm not going to go much into it. It was a resounding victory. It sent the world a message that they were not to be messed with, that they would fight, and it did nothing to improve relations, obviously, but it did at least establish a little bit of a code of conduct. So it's a pretty significant event in history, people. If you're not aware of the 6-Day War, just take 2 seconds to go to history.com and read about it. It's something else. On to you, sir.
Good stuff as usual, Bill. We always love that segment, and we got a little over. That's why we're kind of rushing at the end here. But we always end the podcast on a feel-good story, human interest, tech breakthrough, a healthcare breakthrough. And today I have one for you climate crazies out there that think that no one's doing anything to save this world, that we're all just sitting on our hands doing nothing. But I've presented to you folks many stories that refute any idea that you're thinking that. But right now there's an inauguration of world's largest second-generation ethanol plant, and it will cut emissions by 30% with sugarcane. So in late May, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio da Silva visited Sao Paulo to inaugurate the world's largest manufacturing plant for second-generation ethanol. The new Bonfim Bioenergy Park will produce 82 million liters of ethanol per year, utilizing a new method that produces 30% fewer emissions. Located in the Brazilian state of Guaraíba, the nation's largest center for the cultivation of sugarcane, the second-generation ethanol, also known as bioethanol, is made from the waste products of sugar production known in the industry as bagasse. Raisin, the company behind the Bonfim plant, says that making ethanol from this waste creates 30% fewer emissions than if previously manufacturing methods were used. New technologies allow for the extraction of residual sucrose from these already crushed canes. A hydrolysis process uses enzymes to separate the individual cellulose fibers so they can be fermented more easily. Raisin has another 9 second-generation plants under construction, and the company is aiming to produce 1.6 billion liters of biofuel per year in the future. The largest single use of ethanol is as an engine fuel and fuel additive. Brazil, in particular, relies heavily upon the use of ethanol as an engine fuel, being the world's leading producer of ethanol. 90% of all new gasoline-powered cars sold in Brazil can also run on hydrous ethanol. Along with the 30% reduction in emissions from manufacturing bioethanol compared to manufacturing conventional ethanol blends, the reduction in emissions from its use as a fuel is as high as 50 and 60%, according to a study from the Argonne National Laboratory. I realize that our engineering that our researchers have managed to do what no country in the world that thinks it is better than us has done. We are able to transform that bagasse into something that produces ethanol of much better quality than the normal ethanol that we produced before, which is second generation ethanol, said President De Silva at the inauguration. So, what do you think of that, Bill? I think it's pretty good that they're now using waste products of sugarcane. They're going to power all their cars. As much as we can dislike this president and Brazil for some of their things, this is a really good revolutionary thing that's coming out of there.
Brazil is mostly under fire for clearing of the rainforest, okay? But the ethanol, I always thought that was a large product in the United States. I thought that was from corn, but I guess I'm wrong.
Well, corn still, it is from corn, but sugar is
Okay.
based from, comes from the ethanol, is brought out of
lower
that.
emissions, greater fuel economy.
I mean,
if it's competitively priced, it's nothing but a win-win, you know?
yep. So just
I think
like
it's
we always
fantastic.
tell it, these climate people think nothing's going on around the world. We're just sitting around letting the world burn. But we continuously show stories that there are a number of players, countries, schools, professors, governments that are trying to do many of the things they're saying. It's just not there yet, but we are continue to try, and we will and
Keep
should.
doing these stories, Steve, because no one's going to see that on CNN tonight.
They'll never see that. Exactly. I agree. But
this stuff needs to be talked about.
Yeah, but that's the end of the podcast, and thank you for tuning in to the We Are Marshall podcast. As usual, my name is Stephen Marshall, and this is my co-host, Bill McIntyre. We are just two guys discussing the issues of the day, laying out the facts of those issues, and giving you our opinion, as you can see, and our view, as you also saw, of those issues. We would also love it here at the We Are Marshall podcast if you'd like and share all of our episodes around your social media. We can be found on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Locals, X, Truth Social, and Rumble. Rumble is where we populate our full channel with season 1 and 2 of all of our episodes. Download the free app Rumble and search for the We Are Marshall podcast. Then subscribe and follow to get notification of our new episodes and other endeavors by Bill and I. Check out our episodes on all these social media sites and share them to help us grow. We would also love it if you would check out our website at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com. You can see a number of things Bill and I are working on the website. If you go to Bill's bio, you can click on a link to all his blog posts. And you can check out Vela on Amazon, where Bill also writes episodic short stories for your viewing. Check out my 2 books currently for sale on Amazon, The Unforeseen Enemy and The Perception Therapist. Both are available now. Also, check out our sponsors, Local Prints, New Hampshire. You can go to our website again at www.wearemarshallpodcast.com and click on the link to Local Prints, New Hampshire on the top left. They're a full-scale screen printing company in Hampstead, New Hampshire, and they are available for domestic and international printing. Of course, go support them, as they always support us. And also check out our large sponsor, MateConnector.com, a large dating website just like all the other big dating websites out there, with all the features that the big players have in the dating sphere. But Mate Connector is much more inexpensive than any of the other players in the dating market. We would also like if you would support our newest sponsor, Army Ranger Painting and Contracting. You can contact and look into them at www.armyrangerpainting.com. They're a full-service contracting company supporting Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Check them out and schedule a free estimate of any project you have. If you have any questions or issues, as we always tell you, you can reach us both at the following emails: Bill at wearemarshallpodcast.com and Steve at wearemarshallpodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening in. We appreciate all your support, and we will be back in a couple days with another episode. Thank you, and have a good evening, my friends. Let's talk to you soon.